Well, it's that time of the year again, and I thought I'd make a video about taxes. Not comprehensive. I don't want to cover everything. Well, I couldn't cover everything even if I wanted to, but um, the one sentiment I want to address here is the idea that paying taxes is patriotic. This is something that I hear from time to time, and I just recently read it in a letter to the editor in my local paper, and that to me is an infuriating and maddening idea. The idea that taxes are patriotic or good or noble or something that we should be proud to do, that we should be eager to do. First of all, the people who say that are typically hypocrites because the IRS, I mean, you can send the government as much money as you want, and if they are so keen on it, then by all means they should send as much money as they possibly can to the federal government. And by and large, they don't ever do that. Usually what they really mean when people say that they want people to pay higher taxes is they want more stuff, and they figure the only way that's possible is if the government takes more money. But the reason that people, I think that it's patriotic is a really common conflation that happens. And the conflation is that where people think of the state as society. And if you ask people about that, if you say, do you think that the state and society are the same, that they're one thing, most people will say no. They understand that there's a difference. However, in their rhetoric, in the conclusions they come to, and the positions they take, that's the implied basis for much of them. So, you know, when people join the military or get some kind of, even get a job in the bureaucracy, people will say that you're, quote, serving your country when you're just working for the government. The only way that you could categorically be said to be serving your country is if everything that you did for the government was for the country. And of course, that's, I mean, you don't have to be a libertarian to realize that's probably a stretch. The government does things that are probably, I mean, you could be the biggest socialist in the world and you'd have to admit, at least sometimes the government does stuff that isn't good for society, that's contrary to the interests of society, in which case you can't just assume that working for the government is good for the country. And by the same rationale, paying taxes isn't necessarily good for the country. When you pay taxes, the government, that's just money for the government, and it's money that the government can spend any way it wants. I heard recently that, you know, the promises of government, that when politicians run and they make promises, those promises are non-binding. They can break those at any time. You can't take them to court. The worst you could do is, you know, not vote for them or think less of them, but you don't have any legal recourse. But I would go further and say none of the functions of government are binding. You're not entitled to anything, and even in areas where they claim that you are entitled, they have a monopoly on arbitration if a dispute were to arise, and they have the monopoly on legislation, which means they can always just retroactively make whatever they did legal. And since they're also the arbiters, I mean, that's a ridiculous joke to think that you can just make up a new law to justify what you did, but it's perfectly reasonable if you are also the arbiter. I mean, if you had a third-party arbiter who wasn't biased, that would be silly. You'd be, you know, you'd lose any case, any dispute. But if you're the arbiter, then not necessarily. And that's the reason why when you send them your money, you shouldn't just imagine that it's good because you think that the government has made all these promises to you, like Social Security, or to defend you, or to protect you, or I don't know, to build your roads or whatever. The government can use that money for whatever it wants, and any way it wants to. And by and large, it squanders most of it, no matter what it decides to do. If it decides to spend it on the military, most of it will be squandered. If it decides to spend it on infrastructure, most of it will be squandered. But then even what it decides to spend it on, that also is of dubious utility to anyone in particular for sure, or society generally, at least as far as such a thing can even be spoken of. The I mean, when they build something like a road, you know, they don't think what's the best for the most consumers. They think what's the best for me. What's going to get me the most votes? What's going to get me the most political power? Which one is going to fill the coffers of some construction company that I own or that my brother owns or whatever? Or, you know, which one's going to make me look the best? And they don't take your tax money and go, oh, well, we got tax money from this person. Let's make sure we cut them into the benefit. No, they don't. They don't consider at all how much you pay in taxes, if you even paid any taxes, and what your wants or needs are. They couldn't care less. They don't even have a method for understanding what you may even want. So when somebody says that it's patriotic, that it's good to pay taxes, I mean, they're characterizing the government as something that even cares what they think, when it doesn't. It doesn't even have a mechanism for even finding out what you even think would be a good way to spend the money. You're just giving it to them. It's like a tithing to an angel or a god or something, that you just think, oh, if I just give this money, good things are going to happen. No, they get your money and then they use it for their ends. And their main end, the end that underpins everything they do, is their need and their desire to rule over you. Because without that, then they can't have all the ancillary benefits. You know, they, to an extent, they just want material comfort. But people, contrary to popular belief, aren't only motivated by materialism. You know, sometimes people value other things, like the will to dominate others, which is something that many people in government, not just the politicians, but many of the bureaucrats themselves, and if you don't believe me, just go on YouTube and watch videos of cops gone bad to see that it looks like a lot of them do it for more than just the pay. And when I don't mean they do it because they want to help old ladies, because they like to break skulls, or they like to have power over others, or they like to be the center of attention. You know, I know a lot of politicians, I think, they just like to be the guy who gets the toast at the parties or whatever. And I guess that's not super evil, but in the process of having that position, they ruin all of our lives and screw the economy. So that's a pretty horrible way to satisfy your vanity. And when you're sending them money, which is extortion, by the way, I mean, the only way it's not extortion is if you just concoct a double standard and say it's not extortion when the government does it. That's ultimately where this all. I know people will say democracy and voting, but there again, when you put forth other examples of a majority telling somebody what to do, if it's not the government, then they won't accept it. So, you know, if I say, well, what if I live in a neighborhood of 20 people and they all just show up and say, well, we all voted, we're taking your house, or we're going to kill you. Very few people would say, oh, yeah, that's fine. But if the government does it, they say that's fine. And so obviously there's a double standard there. And every social contract theory I've ever heard boils down to that. And that just is completely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. But it's also silly. I think it's just a lame excuse of an argument to justify conservative bias. You know, you grew up with a government, you accept it, and you're just going to spout whatever to make it sound good. And I think that's also part of the reason people think of paying taxes as patriotic, because to dignify your enslavement makes it seem like it's not slavery. I don't think that the people who say that ever thought of what they have as slavery, but there is there's a certain futility. I mean, if you're even if you're a socialist, you know, if you view the state as a panacea, as a force for good, you must have a very frustrating life because you know all the socialists I've talked to, they have all these plans for what the government should do, and the government basically never does any of them. I mean, like I know lots of people who advocated universal health care, but the bill that was passed, the Obamacare, I never heard anybody advocate anything like that. And you know, we're forcing people to buy from insurance companies and whatnot. Uh, it must be very frustrating to view the state as a panacea and yet have absolutely no control over it at all, and to just see it do, you know, I guess you can be really picky and you can pick the 1/100th of 1% of what the government does that you concur with, but that's a lot of blindness there, and I think just uh, ennobling your interaction with it, ennobling the tithe you give it, might maybe make that a little bit easier. So I hate paying taxes. I do it because it's extortion. I don't want to go to jail. Um, but I just imagine how much wealthier I would be even now if I never paid taxes, and how amplified that effect would be if it was reverberated through everyone in society. So paying taxes is not patriotic. The government destroys society. It's the only way a society can kill itself, basically. Societies can be destroyed by, you know, volcanoes and droughts and stuff too, but the only way that they can kill themselves is with the government. And uh, feeding something that's so deadly, feeding a parasite like that, is not patriotic. It's really bad, and it's sickening. So happy tax day.